having access to sufficient food or food of adequate quality to meet one's basic needs. According to the United Nations, Nigeria is a nation of over a population of over 220 million people, the largest in Africa, and of course, the sixth largest in the world. And according to the report, according to the United Nations, about 37% of the total population of Nigeria is living below the international poverty line. The international poverty line was updated from about $1.90 to $2.15. So apparently over 80 million Nigerians are living below the international poverty line. Then, of course, recently, the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning also released a report saying over 31.8 million Nigerians are suffering from acute food insecurity, compounded with malnutrition and in women and children. According to statistics provided by 2024 CADA Harmonized Reports, the surge in food commodity prices, which is as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy, in addition to security challenges, has placed millions of Nigerians in a precarious situation. Talking about over 31.8 million Nigerians suffering from acute food insecurity. So it's really a big challenge. And of course, recently, the World Bank also released a report saying that food insecurity is worsening in Nigeria as a result of poor infrastructure. They also cited, insecurity in some parts of Nigeria as, leading to the increase in food insecurity in the nation. Joining us on the conversation this morning is Ikechukwu Kalu, an economist and, of course, a public affairs analyst as well. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning.
Thank you very much for inviting me over. Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you. Let's look at the World Bank report talking about food insecurity in Nigeria, citing poor infrastructure. Most especially, let's look at it from the first angle, poor road infrastructure in Nigeria. In that report, they talked about the fact that a lot of roads are not good, so farmers are not able to move their products from the farms, to the end user. That's one of the reasons they gave as the causes of worsening food inflation, food insecurity rather, in Nigeria. What's your opinion? How do you react to that report from the World Bank?
I think the report correctly captures our deficit as far as road infrastructure is concerned. I think that it's a problem that we do understand that we live with already in terms of road infrastructure, how it impacts the movement of food across the country. The evidence is very glaring as to how it impacts, limits our food production and creates insecurity. We can see it all around us, but what is most important is what is being done about this. How exactly all the policies that are in play right now, how do they impact on it? We've seen subsidy removed from oil, and that has increased the cost of fuel and cost of logistics to move food from the farm down to the market. And that has also aggravated cost of living. So the idea and the excuse when government gave for removal of subsidies that they want to be able to plow this money into infrastructure. So the question is, how is the infrastructure, how is that impact? How is that money that being flown into infrastructure, how is it performing? Do we see any changes? Are there signs of changes? I think that's the conversation. But whether it's true or not, the answer is obvious.
Absolutely. Just before you continue, still on that report, according to the World Bank, poor road infrastructure across the country is significantly driving up transportation costs and deepening food insecurity in Africa's most populous country, according to the new report by the World Bank. And the report titled Transport Connectivity for Food Security in Africa, Strengthening Food Supply, said that many roads in rural Nigeria are either unpaved or poorly maintained, making it difficult for farmers to move produce from farms to market, especially during rainy season. And also, somewhere in that report, we're made to understand that over 40% of perishable goods are lost by farmers. That's quite huge, over 40%. As a result of infrastructure deficit, there is an inefficiency in the system. And we are losing over 40%. What do you see as the implication of that to the worsening food insecurity in Nigeria?
The implication has always been, I mean, if you do something and you lose 40%, you're left with 60%. I mean, 40% out of 60%. You take out that, I mean, that's 20%. So we are talking a huge opportunities being lost. If we can be able to claw back that by providing the infrastructure, then of course people's standards of living will improve. However, I like to see, it's good that these challenges have been highlighted, but the question is how are we dealing with it, or what's the best way to do it? We already have food infrastructure, food insecurity. It's very clear that we are dealing with a present danger. From the farmers and herders crisis down to the issue of infrastructure. Now, zeroing in on infrastructure and road infrastructure, one of the things I like to speak about is the local roads, local farm roads. For too long, our farmers have had to deal with going to farms with bicycles, bike, and very other kind of non-motorized transport services. But having increased fuel prices now, it has also aggravated where they need to bring out stuff from their farm. Now having roads that are very bad and running into rainy season, it aggravates the problem. One of the things World Bank has done, which I think wasn't mentioned in that report, I don't know, it was mentioned tangentially, was the ramp program. They understood that there was a problem with last mile roads to the farm.
Oh, that's you're talking about the Rural Access Mobility Program, right?
Exactly, yeah. So many states have keyed into that. It's been long available, but there was a new scheme 2 years ago, which some states have kicked into. They provided counterpart funding.
Oh, sorry to cut in, Mr. Kalu. The Rural Access Mobility Program, the RAMP program by the World Bank, talked about $300 million provided. Can you shed more light into that and how it works?
Yeah, so it's a grant for states, participating states. You sign up to participate. It was disbursed to states. When you sign up to that, you provide roads that are very local roads. When they sign up, this is released to states. They provide some level of counterpart funding. They provide impact it's going to have on the environment, roads that are chosen, and then funds are disbursed. And then you have to provide evidence of impact. And so what we'll find is that participating states, some states have keyed into the program. I know very well that Abia State is part of it. I know that very well that states like Ekiti, states like Kaduna have been part of it. And one of the things they've used that to do is to advance their rural roads. So roads that are going to farms are being paved as we speak currently. We have seen increased number of roads in those areas, interland roads that connect to farms, roads where you can bring goods out from the farm. And so there's rapid progress on that for states that are participating. What's important is that we need to understand why more states are not participating. We have 36 states, but as of now, I know that maybe about less than 10 are fully keyed into it. But the rest of them, I've not heard anything about them being able to key into that. And so we are seeing traction in some of the states that are doing that. Some of them are just less than 12 months intervention, but the impact is already real. People are able to bring food to the market, to the urban centers. Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. All right. Sorry to cut in. I would like you to continue with that line of thought. But you mentioned Ekiti State as part of the states that have, benefited from the RAMP project. My question is this: is there any form of monitoring and evaluation? Who is actually monitoring this grant from the World Bank? Because, like I said, $300 million being made available to these states. Who's monitoring what? I'm interested in Ekiti State that you mentioned because personally, I passed through Ekiti State not quite long ago, and I can tell you factually that the roads are in a deplorable condition. The roads are in a deplorable condition. Not even talking about rural roads here, okay? The major roads, so not to talk of the roads. So if the major roads have not been fixed, how then are we sure that they are fixing the rural roads? So when the World Bank is making this rural access mobility program funds available, is there any way they're monitoring to make sure that the funds are being judiciously utilized? Because I'm just giving you an eyewitness account of what I saw in Ekiti State.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the eyewitness account. But I think that it's good that you made reference to the fact that those were major roads. And in this scheme, we weren't talking about what the title is Rural Access Mobility Program. And so when you say that urban roads are in a deplorable state, that's the federal government remit. That wouldn't be a fair assessment of the RAMP. The RAMP still has to do with roads that are inner, roads to farmhouses, roads to farm locations, clusters. And if you go to some of those locations presently, I'm very sure I've seen pictures in terms of monitoring from there. Ekiti State Agricultural Commissioner posting progress on that. As for monitoring, the World Bank has a framework for monitoring projects that they release grants for. One of the things you hear some of the times is that some contractors are blacklisted because they did not deliver effectively on projects that were World Bank projects. Why were they able to spot that? Because there was monitoring. So the World Bank itself has its own mechanism for monitoring its own projects. They do not release, they have a project office that works together with the state. So for every World Bank project, they select the consultant that is to give them a report independently of what the state is doing. So the consultants provide reports to the World Bank as to progress level of this project. So it's not a case of people just collecting money and then they can't deliver reports. There are consistent reports around RAMP. I'm sure that by the time they have a milestone assessment, which World Bank does regularly with this project, they will come up with the results for states that are doing very well and states that are not doing too well with the money that has been disbursed to them. I'm sure we're going to get that report in the course of time.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. So I do really want to believe that the rural roads there are really being worked on, like you said, since that is what the grant is meant for. There is another aspect of that report which is quite worrisome, and I would like us to look at it. In that report, it says that the report revealed that in 2023, Nigeria recorded a serial trade deficit of $2 billion. That's a serial trade deficit of $2 billion. And in that same period, South Africa posted a net positive balance of $170 million. We having a deficit of over $2 billion, and South Africa having a positive, of $170 million. What are we not getting right? Let's look at the bigger picture here. South Africa is doing well. They are even importing, I mean, of course, we have some of the organizations in Nigeria. I don't want to mention names where you go into, you see grocery from South Africa. So what are we not getting right? Apart from the poor road infrastructure, how about storage systems in Nigeria? Do we have sufficient silos for storage? Do we have other storage facilities? So let's just look at the big picture. What are those areas you think we can improve on to make sure we're really tackling food insecurity in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for that question. Very clearly, when you cite South Africa, and South Africa, one of the major problems that they have, or one of the conversations in South Africa, if you watch the visit to Donald Trump, was about land expropriation, and then dealings with white farmers, meaning that the agricultural sector is has heightened level of interest because of the expertise that is available, because of the level of knowledge that is available to them, and then how advanced that their systems are. So in terms of comparison, I think we are nowhere close to what South Africa is doing. However, how can we close that gap? We can definitely close that gap by investing critically in systems that you've spoken about, silos, food storage systems, having critical linkages, investing in value chain, cold chain vehicles, logistics rooms you can have at the airports where you can have cold chain systems to preserve foods, fresh perishables, and even airlift them to, rather than use lorries that can get stuck in traffic, that can get stuck in the road. That's one thing. You can also invest in rail with multimodal systems. We shouldn't just solely depend on roads. Why can't rail bring stuff from Ilorin or from Osogbo into Lagos? Why should we depend solely on trailers? Why can't we bring ram from, or why even can't we slaughter the ram in Niger State and then have them freeze them in cold chain vans and bring them into the urban cities, Abuja, Lagos? Why can't that happen? I mean, these are places we need to start to invest in. But before we can invest in that place, there has to be, we have to de-risk the system, de-risking in the sense that if the roads are available and then we don't have the sort of crisis we have in terms of terrorism, act of terrorism on trailers, or we don't have delays from security agencies, I mean, that should help. Lagos State is investing in a massive storage system somewhere around the Ekpe. They're also having middle-level markets. That's a very good way to jumpstart your storage system so that you can limit post-harvest losses. I mean, that's a very good way to do that. I expect so many other states to toe that line. Also, I expect that we can have not just storage systems, but we also have special vehicles to transport certain kind of grains and certain kinds of food. I mean, there was a time in Lagos where you had to regulate the kind of meat van that carries meat, that have been slaughtered. Even provision of abattoirs, providing them with modern equipment. These are things we need to, that are ready for investments, that are available for people to invest in. But then what is preventing that investment? I spoke with a friend who has some dealings with Niger Foods. Niger Foods has ambition to cultivate 1 million hectares. However, I spoke to the friend and he was saying that they have some teething problems. The teething problems is that investors are unwilling to provide financing for us doing 3 tons for the same land in South Africa that is going to do 10 tons. The yield gap is significant. And I asked why was that gap so much? It was like the technology in terms of seed, how to preserve the seed, how to cultivate the land, all of the things, technologies that are involved prior to planting. there's a whole lot that is involved in that. That sort of investment, that sort of knowledge is what we need to invest in, from research to providing institutions that can do all that. So we're still at that infancy stage. We need to just continue making the right investment, both from public sector and from the private sector. How many times have you heard that the private sector has invested in research, agric research? Because it just thinks that, okay, food is just going to be in the market. But I mean, for you to grow, you have to do demonstration farms, you have to have demonstration farms, you have to test your theory and knowledge, practice over time before you can get that kind of result.
All right. Okay, all right. Most of these measures, most of these recommendations you've prescribed, recommendations that will take time, investing in research organizations. You talk about private organizations not keen into research, but again, what's in it for them? If private organizations are going to come into, funding researchers into agriculture, the question is, what's in it for them? They might be asking though, what is the government doing about it? Why should they go into it? That's on one side. On the other side, let's look at the figures now. The Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning released a report saying about 31.8 million Nigerians are suffering from acute food insecurity. And that's coming from the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. A lot of Nigerians will say that figure might actually be conservative. So if 31.8 million Nigerians are living in acute food insecurity, I'm talking about those living in acute ones, then some Nigerians will say up to over 50% might actually be suffering from food insecurity, but it might not be acute. They are saying 31.8 million are having it, having acute food insecurity. My question is, in the short term, what can be done, to relieve this burden? Again, a lot of Nigerians living below the international poverty line, which is about $2.15. Bringing it to Nigeria, bringing it to Naira, that should be around roughly, say, 3,500 Naira. So, of course, a lot of Nigerians are living below 3,500 Naira per day. So my question is, what can we do in the short term to curb this, to just ease this burden of people, Nigerians, suffering under the burden of acute food insecurity?
Okay, to be very blunt, you really you cannot lift 31.5 million people out of that acute poverty overnight. That's the truth. We've tried to see government do palliative in 2023, coming into 2024. But I think that the approach has to change. Like you said, there's that popular saying that the best time to plant a tree is now. If we say it's going to take long, why not just start now? Why wait? Because if people are suffering acute poverty, there are two instances you can do. You can do a palliative measure to at least assuage that.
All right. Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
Oh.
So, which is what happens with a lot of people, a lot of countries. What you do in the meantime is you provide palliative, food subsidy, food stamp, local governments trying to intervene, make sure that the people who are poor, they can buy food at a subsidized rate. However, the challenge is that beyond your 40% is wasted. Your 40% that's productive is wasted. Why don't you make it more productive by fixing whatever is making it? So that's one thing. You're fixing that, ensuring that that is fixed, and then you're ensuring that on the long term, you can make those people more productive. Because why people are poor is because they are not as productive. So the reality is we have to create the environment for them to be more productive. Have better roads, infrastructure. We have to start making that investment right now in better roads. We have to start making investment in the research that is necessary so that we can produce more tones, whether it's private sector that's investing, whether it's public sector, government. We have to make that investment in some of these things. Same thing for storage facilities. But like I said, we're getting more money. We're investing. The government has said they're going to spend 1 trillion. I see them buying tractors. They're trying to buy tractors and then do land clearing, 50% subsidy. Many states are up on that now. So that's a way to encourage cultivation and make sure that food comes cheaper. Also, for grains that are staples, my advice would be that, which the government is already heading to, that we expand importation of those things. Allow rice coming. We can allow more rice coming since we are having challenges with production here. For the meantime, we just allow that coming, allow maize coming because of its impact on the poultry chain and all of that. But over time, while maintaining investment in cultivation in those two things that I mentioned, we also have to keep that conversation going in the front burner, because once you don't keep that conversation, the tendency is for investments to defocus to flyovers, to try to build white elephant projects. Agriculture is not sexy enough to some governors. So sometimes, because the gestation time takes long, they don't want to invest in that. They want to invest in shiny things that people can clap for. But the real thing is that, I mean, if you look at that numbers and you make it a KPI to say, I want to cut down on the number of poor people in my state. How do I do that? Agriculture gives me the best bet, and so I'm going to invest in the agriculture. And so we have to keep hope alive. We have to keep holding the government, having this sort of conversations. I mean, we food insecurity, a key part of it, beyond even the roads infrastructure, is also the insecurity situation.
Yes, all right. I was going to come to that. Sorry to cut in. I was going to come to that. Two major factors have been fingered as the causes of food insecurity in Nigeria. The first one, of course, is the removal of fuel subsidy. And the second one is security threats, insecurity in Nigeria. So we're going to short break. When we return, we talk about the second one. But just before we go on that break, let's look at the first one. Ever since fuel subsidy was removed in Nigeria, it led to food inflation, okay, which resulted in food insecurity. My question is, as an economist, what do you think the government of Nigeria should have done better? You know, fuel subsidy was removed, okay? A lot of money, okay, has been made available to the federal government as a result of removal of fuel subsidy. But some Nigerians are saying, instead of using this money judiciously, they are busy spreading the money, sharing it among governors and National Assembly members, and not really using the funds, you know, generated from the removal of fuel subsidy to address the suffering of Nigerians. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is that this is a democracy. The people have the ultimate responsibility in a democracy, and they can hold their leadership to accountability. They are not helpless. These senators, these people, they interact with us. They come to us every weekend. They come around town. It's an opportunity to ask questions. I mean, we have to hold them to feet to say, we are getting X, Y, and Z allocation. Why exactly are we not seeing investment in this space? I mean, that we are not helpless when it comes to democracy. If it was just a dictatorship, maybe I would have understood. But when it's a democracy, people have the right to speak up. People have the right to hold the government accountable to their promises, to say, hey, you promised X, Y, Z, I need you to fulfill that promise in that. So if you feel there's more money going to the federal government, to states and local government, why are we not holding them responsible? I mean, not to hold brief for some, but I can see that they're making it. I spoke to Lagos State. I spoke to the fact that they're making significant investment in storage systems somewhere around there. I know that they're doing well. I know your state government has invested significantly Fashola Agri Hub. There are quite a few states that are trying to do something around agriculture. investing in that space. But it can never be enough because we have significant deficits. And let's be very factual. It won't happen in 1 year. That deficit won't be closed in 1 year, even if we make all kinds of money. So people also have to manage their expectations to say, hey, over time, as this investment goes on, we're going to see that the gradual decrease in food inflation. We've already seen some level of decrease already. So we hope as the year continues, as investment continues to be made, that inflation will continue to decelerate. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll take a short break. Please hang in there. We'll take a short break. And when we return, we'll look at the security challenges contributing to the food insecurity crisis in Nigeria. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This is Morning Spring on Western Spring Television, and we've been talking about food insecurity in Nigeria, the worsening case of food insecurity, according to a World Bank report released recently. And we've been speaking with Ikechukwu Kalu, Economic Intelligence Lead for Redwire Marketing Consulting, an economist and public affairs analyst. Thank you, Ikechukwu Kalu, for staying with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Just before we went on that break, we were talking about the food insecurity and the causes, the two major causes. So we've talked extensively on the aspect of poor infrastructure, talking about poor road infrastructure, and of course, storage facilities that has been leading to a loss of up to 40% of perishable goods by farmers, worsening food insecurity in Nigeria. Now let's look at the security angle of it, the security threat challenges, leading to the worsening food insecurity in Nigeria. Recently, we've had increasing attacks and terrorist attacks in places like Benue State and Plateau State. For one, Benue State is known, or should I say was known, or maybe we should say is still known as the food basket of the nation. But look at what is going on in Benue State right now. As a result of insecurity, a lot of farmers cannot go to their farms. The same thing applies to Plateau State and some other areas in the northeast. As a result of insecurity, farmers are not able to go to their farm. What do you think can be done in this area? Because we're talking about food insecurity. There is no way we can increase production if farmers can't even go to their farms. Just recently, we saw a report about 90 farmers have been killed in Borno alone over the past 5 months. So if we are having such, how then do we expect to increase production in the face of terrorism and security threats on the part of farmers?
It's actually a very, very grim picture. This security situation provides a very grim picture that you have painted, actually. The situation it's more grim when you factor in the fact that there's kidnapping. There are clashes down south here, Enugu, Ebonyi. We still have incidents of kidnap of farms around Osun, around Oyo State, even Ekiti. Yeah, so it's a challenge, national challenge. It goes beyond even Benue, it goes beyond central and northeast. And it's a national challenge, the insecurity. Now, we wouldn't know how much disincentive to investment in agri that this has brought. A lot of the people who want to invest in agri are people who stay in diaspora. They just want to invest and then have people work on the farms and then just come and invest. But because of stories they've heard about kidnap, stories they've heard about herdsmen damaging farms, they put back their money or invest in something else. So on one hand, we have the actual farmers being killed. On the other hand, people who have the technology, who have the exposure and want to invest in it, can't do that because they are afraid of the insecurity in that sector. So what you combine to have is a situation where cultivation is continually threatened, apart from the fact that even the little that is cultivated is lost to post-harvest losses and so many other. So in that sense, you can see that we have an acute challenge. The government has a challenge on its hands and needs to redouble those efforts. Some of the states have taken several steps. Some have what we call agro rangers. Some of the states in the Southwest are using Amoteco to sort of comb the forest just to ensure that foreign elements are taken out of those places and then people can go to farm very peacefully. We've witnessed some limited success with that, but then we would need to have much more investment in technology, drone technology, night vision capabilities to be able to detect some of these criminals, especially down south here. For the north, I think it's a mix of terrorism, it's a mix of too many things, land issues, indigenous settlership, especially in places like Benue, places like Plateau. And I think federal government has to redouble their efforts from providing boots on the ground to also supporting with significant logistics, as well as the legislation, provide some mediation. Some of the clashes are from people who claim that they've been staying there and then they want to ranch, they want to free range their cattle around places where they're fertile ground. So for boundary commission, they might have to establish between the Agri Ministry and boundary commission, we have to use institutional measures to be able to sort out those challenges in those states. And then for terrorism issue, where bandits just come in and then kill farmers, those who do not pay to them, that is a different ballgame entirely. It has to be dealt with from the National Security Advisor's Office. It has to be dealt with an understanding that these people are a threat to both not just food security, but they're a threat to the national security. Because anything that threatens your food security is a direct threat to national security as well. So we must treat that element very seriously and go
absolutely.
Them.
Yeah, absolutely. You just mentioned something, those who are paying levies. And I actually wanted to ask a question in that direction. Recently in Borno State, to start with, Nigeria is supposed to be a sovereign state. Nigeria is a sovereign state. So don't you see this as failure on the part of the federal government? And here's what I mean. Recently in Borno State, in Mati local governments in a particular community, in newspaper reports, we learned that there's this community, the farmers there, they actually pay levies to bandits, to terrorists, who provide protection for them to enable them go to their farms. Now we have two rival terrorist groups there. We have the ISWAP, that's the Islamic State of West Africa province. Then we also have Boko Haram. So they had a figure under ISWAP who allegedly was providing, security for them. Then somehow that figure was not around. It was away. Then the rival faction came and just, caused a lot of mayhem there, killed some farmers and slaughtered a lot of them. In a sovereign state called Nigeria, why should Nigerians have to pay levies to terrorists to be able to go to their farms? It means these people are not faceless. That's number one. That's one point. It means they are not faceless. It means they are known figures because the farmers interact with them. They pay levies to them in a sovereign state. Don't you see this as failure on the part of the federal government of Nigeria?
The failure is the obvious part. It's clear that this is an unbecoming situation where Nigerians have to pay terrorists for that. But then let's piggyback and track why exactly did we get into this kind of state? How exactly did we get to a point where that place became so ungoverned, no institutional authority for terrorists or bandits to now take over? How did that state of it, because it couldn't have happened overnight. It must have been something that went on over time because there was no local support to these people. If you look at Mate on a map or look at pictures that have emerged from Mate, you can see it's a rural economy. There's largely no paved road to that place. There's largely no sense of the government presence. And that's the problem. And that's so what exactly have been happening over the years that has led to the fact that people are now see themselves as outliers and take that place as they can be able to access that place and take it as an area where they can extract levies. It's because over time, we have not fulfilled our responsibility as government to the people in those places. And it has come back to bite us. They're largely maybe no primary school, or they're not educated properly. They can't fit into the society. So they become bandits. They become so it's a problem that metasized, and we have to deal with it. We can't grandstand to say in a sovereign state what happened. I mean, we don't have that monopoly of violence anymore. If these people are able to attack barracks, they're able to attack military bases successfully and kill soldiers. I mean, it's time to understand that we are dealing with a warfare that is, we actually are in a warfare. So it's just beyond people extracting levies. It's a much more bigger ramifications, and we have to treat it as that. Government has to, like I said, the National Security Advisor or National Security, the federal government itself has to shape up and exterminate all foreign elements, all people that are holding ground.
All right.
Exterminate them and take them.
All right. I know. All right. I know you're an economist. I'm also a public affairs analyst. So I'm asking you this one as a public affairs analyst. I'm still talking about the insecurity in some parts of the nation, the Northeast, for instance, Borno precisely. I'm talking about Mate. For Borno State, the governor has been raising alarms over time. The governor of Borno State, Governor Zulum, interestingly, is of the APC. He belongs to the ruling party. So if he were a governor from the opposition party, they will say maybe it's just propaganda. So here's an APC governor who has been raising alarm saying that terrorists are taking over his state. Terrorists are taking over, all the territories in the state. Recently, he made a remark, I think it was on Sunday, when the governor said in Mate local government that about 300 villages, that just one is left standing. That terrorists have taken over all the villages, that just one is standing. The question is, how long will that one stand? Now, my question is this: why is it taking so long for the federal government to take a stand on this? Look at what's happened in Rivers State, for instance. I mean, it's child's play compared to what's going on in Borno State. Here, the governor has been crying out to the federal government for intervention, and nothing has been done. The president has not tackled it decisively, hasn't said anything about it, but the president was quite in a hurry to declare a state of emergency on Rivers State. Why do you think that is so? Why are they ignoring the cries of the governor of Borno State, who is saying he's under threat, he's under attack, terrorists are taking over his state? Why exactly do you think the government, the federal government, is not taking decisive steps to address this issue of insecurity in Borno State?
So I'm going to be very careful here because you cited the example of Rivers, the state of emergency compared to Borno State. Rivers State case is a bit of different in terms of dynamics. When I say different, it's different in the fact that the organs that are supposed to represent governance were at loggerheads. And so if the people who are supposed to provide basic governance are at loggerheads, then it's a dangerous situation. And that's So it's more or less that's an administrative intervention. Like you see that the state of emergency that happened in Rivers State. And quite frankly, everywhere seems calm over there. Nobody else has been killed.
No, sorry to cut in, Mr. Kalu. They also cited security threats as part of the reasons for declaring state of emergency. That's why I included Rivers. The president cited security threats.
Exactly. When agents of government are having issues, I mean, what you expect is going to be, it's a threat. It's a threat. I mean, if the state assembly were going to impeach the governor over time and then do a threat both which side, I mean, it's just not common sense to allow that situation to degenerate. Now, we now bring it back to Borno, which has already degenerated. One, you don't want it to degenerate, and then the other has degenerated already because we've had state of emergency in Borno State before. We've had it it was declared before. So declaring it again because somebody was killed in Mate or that whole zone would mean that whatever administrative structure you have in Maiduguri that is peaceful is already going to be upended. And meanwhile, that's not the case. That's not the essence. The intervention the governor is looking for is to send level of security to push back those elements back from holding those territories that have been mentioned, and which is a legitimate call. Now, the president himself has held Security Council meeting before he went to Rome. And then I know that the Chief of Defense Staff relocated to Mate, he relocated to Maiduguri. For me, if the Chief of Defense Staff has relocated there and they have been tasked with trying to find an element of solution, we've seen some level of pushback to those criminal elements. Whether they have been able to be fully successful is going to be determined by many. But what I think is that we need to be a bit more decisive. Don't wait for these guys to come and hit our military base or take a town before we are reactionary in our approach. What we should be is to be proactive. Take the war to them. Take it to the mountains where they are. Take it to Chad. Take it to everywhere that these terrorists are and try to exterminate them. But rather than sit back and hold position and wait for them, I think that for me is a wrong strategy. I'm not a military expert, but from common sense, it just makes sense to me that we go after them. Former president invested $1 billion to get equipment from the US. We bought fighter jets, we bought Tucano jets. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Absolutely.
So it's a matter of equipment. The security budget for this year is as significant again, and we're going to be spending a lot of money on and largely in those war theater zones. So I don't think it's a case of abandonment. I just think it's a case of we need to rejig our strategy, because if not, the president will not be allocating the sum of money that is allocating to the military, the security. However, my own problem with all of the strategies is that we're not investing so much in our police force. And you know the problem, if our police force is not well equipped, you stretch the army. The army is doing operations in about 30 states. Now, if they were only focused on Borno and those hard-hit areas, while the police are taking care of these other areas, it would have been easier. You have more men, more boots on the ground. Because Borno is quite large in terms of territorial expansion. It's quite large. So when you have most of your men still active in other zones, then it creates a problem of numbers. There's a limit to what you can do. So the problem is we need to make that same investment for our police force so that they can hold on to local crimes, they can deal with issues that are internal. Why the military can go and face the terrorists in Borno State and up north. But if we continue leaving our police force the way it is, just beggarly and then just like that, we'll continue to get the kind of outcomes that we get. That's my opinion.
All right. Coming back to the economic angle, to food insecurity in Nigeria, what exactly can be done? What immediate steps can be taken? I mean, just to relieve the pain of food insecurity among millions of Nigerians, 31.8 million in acute food insecurity situation, living in precarious conditions. What immediate steps can be taken? And here's what I mean. In other places, in a place like the US, for instance, we have food stamps. Okay, a citizen of America cannot die of hunger. One would say, why am I giving that example? Fair enough. Nigeria is the 10th largest producer of crude oil in the world. 10th largest producer of crude oil in the world. So Nigeria is not a poor nation. That is why a lot of Nigerians will still compare Nigeria to other countries that are doing better. So what excuse do we have not to do better? So you're an economist. What immediate steps can be taken just to relieve, the pain of acute food insecurity in Nigeria?
First of all, I need to clear something. When you say we are the 10th largest producer, you have to juxtapose it with the population and the resources. Saudi Arabia produces 10 million barrels per day. They've been doing that for close to 40 years that I've known them. They've been doing that 10 million barrels per day. They refine their oil, and they are 40 million people. So they can afford that. We used to do 10, 20 years ago, we're doing 2.5 million barrels per day. We are struggling to do 1.5 today.
Absolutely.
And we are 230 million people. So we are not as rich as we are making. So we need to let our people know that's finances. We are running a fiscal deficit of 10 trillion or 15 trillion every year. So we must lay the facts down so that to make people understand that it's not uhuru.
Well, sorry to cut in. Sorry to cut in. We have the resources. We have the crude oil reserves. So if we are not doing well, who's to blame for that? If we are struggling, to do 1.5, 1.7 million barrels per day, who's to blame for that? We have the resources. That's the point I'm trying to make. We have the resources.
But the point I'm also trying to make is that if you're going to solve the problem in the immediate term, because you can't, from your reserves, you can't bring it out with pockets. You have to spend money, investment, to bring out those results. And you don't even have that investment. You have to cultivate, you have to call for indirect investment, which you have to cultivate. And so that's a long process. If you're going to solve the problem we have for acute poverty in the immediate term, there have to be much more realistic steps and beyond just having food stamps. Food stamps is a good idea, but we don't have that kind of unlimited resources. What I would say is that we started some process. Some states have been able to win it out. I don't know. That stats was produced in 2023, 2020. I've seen the stats, but I'm pretty sure that if we hold on to what we've been doing since 2024, in terms of being able to subsidize, remove duties on. We're removing duties on rice and key food elements. We remove those so that they can become cheaper, and then try to invest in the value chain. That helps us. That's going to help significantly in that sense. So we are seeing a trending downward price in some items. The ones that are not trending downwards, we need to make much more investment in the value chain, subsidize the seeds, give farmers input in those things, make it subsidized for them so that they can plant, and then ensure there's security for them on the farm. Those are the immediate things that we can do, but not building castle in the air around stamps and all that. Because before you do the data for the people who are eligible for stamps, before you know it, politicians are sharing with their family who are wealthy enough, and those ones are eating free food. Meanwhile, the people who are really poor begin to suffer. They keep suffering the hunger. So you have to be able to, as we structure those things, we have to be very intelligent about that. Being able to social.
All right. Talking about the stamps, that was just an example. Of course, I'm talking about the food stamps in the United States. That was just an example. Now let's put things in the right perspective. What are the food items that have reduced in price? Because when we hear that there's been a reduction in food inflation. Of course, the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, gave their report that inflation. For instance, let's look at rice. Rice, and that's not because of any intervention. To be sincere, there was this rumor about poisonous rice. That rumor came from Badagry. So what we had was now oversupply of rice compared to the demand. So there was this rumor that there was a killer rice from Badagry. It's hello, hello. You mean if you say significantly?
So if the price moves from 110,000 to 50,000 or 60,000.
Hello, are you still with us? I'm sorry, we haven't. We lost your audio there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, please go ahead. It's better now. Yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so if a price for a staple food falls from 110,000 or from 90,000 to 56,000 or 65,000, that's to me significant within 4 months.
Okay, and you're talking about what food item in particular this time? What food item are you referring to get that clear? Okay,
yeah, I'm talking about for maize. Maize also decreased as well. I know that maize had I was tracking the prices around last year December. It was tracking for close to 90,000. Today you can get that for 50,000. But so the reality is that some prices are trending downward. Some are still at their previous levels, but some prices are trending downward. And we don't necessarily have to make light of it. It might be because there are different reasons, but that's what the market is showing. That's what the prices are showing. And that for me, some level of, it's a sign that something is happening. Whether you call it an impact of rumor, whether you call it, we're going to see it over time. We're going to be sure whether that's a rumor or it's just a lasting effect of some of the work that has been done.
All right. I was just wondering how it trickles down to people. You've just given us some figures. Let's look at the other angle, the other side of it. Those who are selling processed foods, because it doesn't really reduce. For some people who do not cook, for some bachelors who do not cook, the price of processed food has not reduced. So you've given some figures about the prices of some food items that have come down right now. But again, it doesn't really trickle down. It doesn't affect that of processed food. What do you think is the cause of that? Looking at the economic angle now, what do you think is the cause of that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so in inflation, there's a phenomenon we call sticky prices. So what we are seeing is that prices of processed foods that are trying to stay sticky, they're going to stay, they might stay sticky for a while once they are certain. But once they are certain that other variables have reduced, you're going to see a slight decrease. However, we must also acknowledge the fact that some other items have also increased on them, and they're trying to balance it up. So for people who were carrying rent over time, their new rent has increased. So they'll price it into what they're selling. They'll price some of the other things that have increased from last year. The impact is just showing now. So they'll price it and they'll do a counterbalancing. So even if they're going to drop, they won't drop significantly because they're still pricing some of the things that increased from last year into this year.
All right. All right. Thank you so much. We really have to go now. Thank you for your time and your perspective. Of course, you just mentioned the fact that we have what we call sticky prices. It will take some time before we start to see the effect. Thank you very much for